Good afternoon and good evening, everyone who's joined us for this evening of discussion on directors and officers insurance. Today's session of an hour is going to highlight on the liabilities faced by directors and protection that's available to them by way of insurance. It's our pleasure to welcome all of you to join us in this seminar. I'm sure you all spared an hour of your time to be with us. It's been a wonderful start for us today to have so many people joining us. With this, we move into the meeting. We have with us Mr. Arunachalam, who's a senior professional in the insurance industry with over 30 years of experience. He is currently advising very many large corporates on matters of liability insurance. The wide range of liability insurance is covering all the insurances that are available in liability practice. He has given international webinars. Many webinars he is presented for an international audience. And he is a very respected broker of repute in the international market. He frequently connects with brokers abroad and is well regarded for his knowledge in the area of liability. Today, he would let us have an insight into the directors and officers' liabilities, which they face in the event of them discharging their liability in a day-to-day course of operations. Even while their work is being discharged in a normal course, the liabilities which are, on them, which come on them, which have to be adequately protected. With these brief words, I welcome Mr. Arunachalam for the event. And welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Venkatesh.
Yeah. Would you want to start, or should I start by asking you questions? How would you want it to go?
We can go ahead, Mr. We can go ahead with your questions. I'll be happy to respond.
Yeah. Okay. So, D&O insurance is not a word that we've heard very early back in the past. I'm sure we are hearing it more often these days. So, we presume it in its fledgling state of its development. But currently, there's a lot of interest on the topic. So we would like to start with something very basic, which is in the minds of corporate people. Is there a requirement for insurance of D&O? What is the requirement for having a director's liability insured?
Yeah, thank you for kickstarting the program, Mr. Venkatesh. It's a pleasure to be with people who are interested in these topics, because it's a changed world now with COVID impacting everybody. There's no way you can escape the wrath of this changed environment. It's also negatively charged in the way businesses are impacted. So, like a corporate would want to look at their risk, how they perceive risk from the physical risk angle or any other trade-related risk. Any corporate should look at liability as an area of exposure, and then if they're not paid due attention, they should be paying now. When I joined the insurance industry after my short legal practice, I found D&O was being spoken about even 31 years ago. There was a D&O cover available. Possibly subsidiaries of US corporates or European corporates would have been taking that. It was not very popular. Maybe customers were buying, but it's not as popular. What has changed between 1989 or 90 when I started my career and now is the risk exposure by many layers has increased. The legal system is getting a little more sophisticated than it was before, and the legal practitioners, both the bar and the bench, are more informed. And this is the lesser effect. The bigger effect is corporates are going through experiences which they haven't gone through in the past. If you review the corporate world, especially in the Indian context, the number of cases, number of banks which were in trouble having given large loans, the number of cases reported in public domain about the siphoning off of investments and funds, number of NPA cases, and those cases where a big time industrialist or a businessman would flee India, leaving the organization in the lurch and multiples of employees. That has really changed the way anybody should look at D&O liability. The product has been there. It's been there in the international market for a number of decades. it is catching up. So I would think that today it has gone beyond the fledgling state. I am advising even startup companies with just about $1 million investment and possibly a $50 or $100 million valuation are taking D&O very seriously. I had cases where the customer heard my presentation and my arguments about D&O, but he made not a 3 a.m. call, but he made an 8 p.m. call saying that, sir, where is my D&O policy? Can you finalize it now? Can I get the policy now? So I told him, you can't buy a D&O cover the way you would buy an insurance policy for your car. It needs a discussion with the insurers, and maybe with a lead time of 1 or 2 days, I was able to place. His desperation was he was getting investment. The investing arm told him that we'll transfer the investment money into your bank account only if you show the D&O policy for your company. So sometimes it can become that critical. But when we discuss about actual case studies and examples where corporates as entities and directors as individuals face legal challenges, it's those areas which should give proper perspective about the importance, the relevance, the correctness, and the structure of a D&O cover.
That's quite a eye opener. We have all been thinking that it's of recent origin. That you mentioned, it's been there for over 30 years now, though it's popular now. The common perception is that directors are at the top of the pyramid. So they've got multiple layers between them and the people at the ground. So it could be assumed that how is it that they get liabilities for reasons of something which happened on the ground? Let's say, for example, employees. We've been seeing cases where the disgruntled employees, for whatever reason they may be disgruntled, bringing suit on directors. Many cases, I'm sure you'll be able to highlight at least one of them for us to better understand. But how does this work? How does it reach up to the director's level?
Yeah, I would think as an individual and as a director of my own company, I would think the awareness and the understanding of D&O cover should be primarily for the directors themselves, and the organization feels responsible for them, and then in a bigger way for the organization. The realization of why a D&O cover is going to be useful for them. In a typical day, when an executive or an officer or an employee of a corporate takes decisions in discharge of his official function, he may go wrong. Nobody is infallible. He may go wrong in the way he decides, or he may commit errors. Unintentional, innocent errors can happen. When such things happen, for possibly 100 different instances, it may go unnoticed, or if they have been noticed, they have been forgiven both by the organization and possibly the people impacted. There could be a stray case that somebody was hurt by the error or hurt by the action, or he feels aggrieved by the action, would want to take civil action on the director. He may choose that I face this negative outcome not just because of the organization that is involved, but also because of people organizations are without people lifeless. There is no corporate without the people who are running it. So everybody who is at the receiving end of a negative incident would realize that I had to face this financial loss, I had to face this discrimination, or I had to face this difficult position because of a decision taken by an individual or a host of individuals, because of an error committed in those decisions, or even in many cases because of a lack of decision. A lack of decision also results in huge impact on other people, that somebody decided not to act, so because he was not able to decide. So I would consider that today's relevance of D&O is the individual officer or director or employee who's taking decisions for the corporates may face legal challenge. There may be suddenly a legal notice landing on his table, which would name him by name, and then he has to defend himself. As you know, the Western world and India are much different on this topic exactly. I would today believe a typical Indian corporate would not let down the director. They would want to support him in his decisions, and maybe the defense will be taken jointly by the director and the entity. Both of them are named in the notice, or at least if the notice comes only in the name of the officer, it is likely, most likely, the corporate would stand by the director, and then they would extend help. Number one, by incurring the legal charges. Number two, by assisting him in the process, and to ensure that if it is a mere allegation, he would get out of it by a proper legal defense, and the full help will come from the entity. So today, a typical director or officer may face legal action from a host of outside sources. Number one, I would consider today, in today's environment, is the government. Today's government is more stronger. I'm not using the word harsher or cruel. They are stronger in the way they take corporates to task. So you would see more action on the pollution front. You would see a lot of action on the corporate front. The register of companies, register of companies, and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs sending notice after notice to corporates. I know one case where the notice was received in the year 2017 for the annual report filed for the year ending 2012. So it is open for government to take action. Then a third source could be customers. Customers may feel aggrieved that there is a problem with the products provided or the service delivered. It was by a wrong action on the part of, let us say, the director in charge of manufacturing or director in charge of services. The fourth could be vendors. A vendor may allege that I was supposed to get an order. It was given to another supplier and there was an ulterior motive. There was some illegal consideration, so I didn't get the order. So a vendor can sue a particular decision maker in for sake of financial loss that he faced. And as you rightly touched upon, employees for wrongful discrimination or for wrongful termination or for illegal transfers or even non-providing of benefits in the employment, an employee can be a source. And if none of these people are there, it could be even a member of the public. There can be a public individual who may feel the society at large or the environment is being impacted by the action or inaction on the part of an individual. You can see every pollution case, it would be blamed on the people in management. So even a person from the public can be a source of legal challenge. If such a notice or a legal action comes, if the organization is unable to help the director, or if the director is not able to successfully defend himself, then there may be a court award against him, which may be in monetary terms very severe. He may not be able to pay off from his own resources. In those cases where a company also is not able to indemnify him, the award given by a court may impact the savings or the wealth, private wealth of the individual. He may innocently lose several years of his earning just because of a successful litigation by a claimant. So I would today consider D&O to be very important for directors because it saves the individual and his estate and his personal fortunes from the action of a legal award.
That is, the point that you made, one of the things that, better exemplifies the gap could be, the inaction also comes into question. I mean, people could question inaction and that could be a result of a liability suit. Is something that's revealing to us. You talked about various stakeholders who could be bringing up a suit against directors. Could you give us an example of, let's say, an employee suit, maybe in India, maybe outside the country, wherever it's more appropriate? Could you give us an example where the employees brought up a suit against directors and possibly a successful suit at that?
Yeah, there are countless examples as to when and where and why employees wanted to take action on the directors and also the entities. In most cases, I would visualize a good lawyer representing the employee would implead both the organization and the directors, possibly the CEO or possibly the HR head or maybe even a unit head who would have been, in their viewpoint, the perpetrator of that wrongdoing. There may be multiple defendants. There are any number of cases, but I would like to touch upon certain cases which happened in the Western markets, especially the United States, for us to understand the severity of this. Walmart is a large retailer with about 11,500 stores globally and at least about 5,000 plus stores in the United States in multiple formats, and they have about 800,000 employees and an annual revenue in 2019 touching 520 billion. It's a large organization. But if you research about what Walmart faced from employees, there have been several allegations and which resulted in complaints to the relevant authorities in US, allegations filed by employees on various counts. One case was where female applicants for job with Walmart for basic jobs, basic store level jobs. For example, the person who is replacing the shelves, the person who is refilling the orders in the shelves of the stores. The Walmart hires thousands of people every week every day hundreds of people join different stores. There is a regular hiring exercise. The allegation filed by about 178 female employees, the number enlarged to 9,000. Finally, the authorities brought it down to a number of 178 female applicants who had cause to allege action or cause to take action on Walmart, that they were discriminated. They proved it went to Equal Employment Opportunities Commission in US, who are the relevant authorities, and they served notice. There was a trial, and the commission and the court was satisfied that over a period of maybe 5 years, between 9 or even 7 years, between 1998 and 2005, Walmart used to conduct interviews, but hired only male applicants between the age group of 18 and 25. It was proved to the satisfaction of a court, not the individuals alleging, to the satisfaction of court. And finally, after a hearing and a trial, the court decided that Walmart will pay compensation of about $20 million. It's a combination of about $200,000 being administrative expenses and about $11.7 million as compensation to be paid to the group of women employees, women applicants to the job. So not hiring or alleged discrimination in hiring or not hiring can be a cause by even a future employee. The second case which Walmart was involved was a disabled employee. You know, somebody worked in Walmart for 16 years. He had multiple health problems. Still, Walmart had this opportunity. I mean, every corporate in US has to provide equal employment opportunities without discriminating on age, sex, or race, or disability. Appropriate job has to be given. This person was already in the employment of Walmart for 16 years, and he had a hearing impairment. He had a visual challenge. He has something wrong with his eyes. He had a disability in mental development. He had a partial mental development. Still, he was doing a job. The job he was doing is to collect and push carts. If somebody buys groceries, they leave the cart in the parking lot. This person's job is to go and collect, bring back the cart. He's somebody who's pushing carts. It's a job. The CEO of Walmart cannot do it. You need somebody to do it. Walmart was, for a period of 16 years, was a good employer. That they employed people with disabilities and provided them appropriate employment. And he had a salary, he had a benefit. The benefit Walmart was giving, when you look at this case, it's even inspiring. The benefit Walmart was giving is to hire a job coach. If you hire somebody with disability, you can't let him work on his own. He needs assistance. So Walmart engaged a job coach who will assist this particular employee or maybe similar employees who are in employment of Walmart. And the funding for the job coach, interestingly, was from the public funds. It came from the public taxpayers' money. That gave costs. That gave costs for action. What happened? Suddenly a new HR manager joined. And somehow he felt that this person is not appropriate for Walmart. He wanted to take action. What he did was he told this employee, you provide fresh medical records of your fitness. Provide fresh medical records after 16 years. So this employee tried to explain, but he was compelled by this unit manager who compelled him to get fresh medical records, which was provided. And based on those medical records, the unit manager recommended for termination of this disabled employee. That at that point of time, the flavor of what Walmart has changed. That they seem to be a unreasonable employer, and somebody filed a case in the relevant authority in US, and $5.5 million punitive damage was awarded, and the remaining was the expenses piece. So we find that employees can be a major source of threat. Coming back to Indian shores, you would find any number of cases of harassment, especially sexual harassment allegations against senior executives. There are any number of reported. If you scan the papers and then just punch sexual harassment as keyword, you'll find as many cases. So in my case, every day I open a broadsheet newspaper or a financial newspaper. I see so many cases. It can be potential D&O cases, claims case studies. Yes, Venkat.
Good, sir.
I hope that answered your question.
No. Translating the billions and millions that you mentioned into Indian rupees, it's a mind-boggling 100 crores on that, the case which was brought by that 170 odd women. 100 crores was the liability awarded. I don't think today any organization that we know of will be able to, look at that kind of a payout without jeopardizing their liquidity position. I think that makes the point of necessity of a D&O cover much more impressive. While it is easier to understand the responsibility that the management and directors have towards their employees, be it against discrimination or equal opportunities, at least when it comes to managing the organization, taking it towards profitability or otherwise, which the directors are interested, is there a course of action which shareholders can bring when all is not going well? I mean, is there a possibility of that? Would you give us some real life situation to understand it?
Yeah. So before we discuss the actual case study, what I want to share is if there is a shareholder or a shares related issue where the director or officer is facing the legal action, the policy by default would cover. But if the defense is required for the entity also, there is an extension to a D&O cover called entity securities coverage. It's an add-on cover to a D&O policy. So that gives protection to the organization also. If tomorrow there is a blame on the organization that there was something wrong with the issuance of shares or something, there's a misdemeanor being alleged on the part of the organization and the management, this entity securities cover will be very relevant. Talking of shareholders' claims, Venkat, I'm reminded of the recent cases, because anything that we discuss today on 12th of August 2020 should be of what is happening around us today. I found that after the COVID lockdown and the COVID pandemic was declared, as you know, every person on the planet is affected. Organizations are going through challenges in how they run the business, but there's also a cloak, or there's a huge blanket of legal exposure they may face. Any number of cases are coming up in courts across the world, especially in US. There are cases relating to business interruption, non-payment of business interruption claims. But I'm seeing a spurt of D&O related claims after the COVID situation came about. When it came to shareholders, there are two cases I wanted to share with you. Very interesting. One case was about a pharmaceutical company in US called Inovio. Inovio Pharmaceutical is owned by a person by name Mr. Kim. He's got a Korean ancestry, but he's an American. He was running this pharmaceutical company. And in the month of February 2020, when the corona spread just started, they alleged that it was there even from December or January. But the real spread globally started in the month of February, and everybody started acting on it. Mr. Kim, it's a listed company in US. Mr. Kim made an announcement that very imminently, within a few days, his company is going to launch a corona vaccine. He made an announcement. On that day, the share value of his, the share price, market price of his company's shares were somewhere around $4.50 or somewhere around $4, between $4 and $5. The moment he made this announcement, there was a jump in the share price. Within a few days, it came to about $8 and $9. It's about almost 100% jump. And then sometime in the month of March, there was a press meeting conducted by President Trump. In that press meeting, Mr. Kim also was available. And he had in that well-attended meeting where press was covering the incident with television cameras recording, Mr. Kim had a conversation with Mr. Trump, and he again confirmed about the discovery and launch of a vaccine in a matter of 2-3 days. Then the share price jumped again, it went up. So between February and March, the share price of this company went up from $4.50 to close to $19. And then there is a organization in the US which is an activist investment group. What they do is if they want to investigate a company, they take shares, they invest in the company, and then try to investigate about the background of the company. If there is something wrong, they bring it to the open. They inform the share investors market that if this company is bad, if there's something wrong going on, you should not invest. That is the intention of that group. So that group, one of the group senior person, he put a tweet. He tweeted that this claim of Mr. Kim about launching a vaccine is not going to happen. He doesn't have any vaccine on hand. It's not going to happen. When that well-known activist investor group person tweeted, immediately the market took notice and the share prices started falling. And within a few days, Mr. Kim, the company, Innovio Pharma, also announced that they actually don't have a vaccine on hand. And even till date, they don't have a vaccine. So within a few days, this share price, which went up to $19, it came down steadily, and maybe in 2 weeks' time, it fell to again $5. So those investors who invested in this company, looking at the increase in share price between February and late March, they decided to sue this organization. Multiple class action suits have been filed by these shareholders who invested shares at a very high price based on a false claim. So this is one COVID-related shareholder claim, which is going to take the shape of a D&O claim. The other D&O claim, Venkat, is on a Norwegian ship liner. As you know, when the COVID spread started, many cruise ships world over were stranded in many ports because they couldn't sail further. And in some other cases, passengers on board the ship were themselves affected by COVID. The ports where those ships are docked did not permit the passengers from coming on shore. When this was happening, in this case also, this Norwegian shipping company kept business state the stock exchange. Nothing was wrong. They gave off their performance for the next about operation being affected by COVID was there. So those shareholders who invested in the Norwegian ship liner, even in NASDAQ, they found that the share price of the ship liner had come down, and they feel aggrieved. So both these cases are shareholder related cases where it could take the shape of a D&O claim. Okay.
So you mentioned that now when you were talking just before going into the case, you talked about something called entity securities to protect the organization against those suits by shareholders. Is there a similar cover which protects the organization from employee suits? Because when we talked about directors, I have two parts of this question. One, how would the organization be protected and not only the directors? Two, is this protection offered only to directors? It's called directors and officers, or to who else does it protect?
See, very relevant question you asked, Venkat. Number one is the frequent confusion about what is the purpose of buying a D&O cover? Is it only for the directors? The question is who are directors? Or is it also to protect the organization? As I explained earlier, by default, by a common understanding, the benefit of a D&O cover is at the first level for the individual director of the company, including the independent directors and the officers in the company. And there is a nuance as to who is an insured or who is the director in the policy. An insured is always the entity which is buying the cover. The individual director is not the insured, not just the insured. The insured is the entity which is buying the cover. But when you want to know who is covered in the policy as a director, one must look at the definition of the policy form. That if you have already bought the cover, you should look at how the word director is defined in the policy, director or officer. There may be subtle differences in the way how they are defined. There may be policy form which will say only directors and including independent directors and officers who are having supervisory or managerial role, only they will be covered under the policy. They will get the benefit of coverage under the D&O policy. There are other policy forms which will consider every employee to be one of the director or officer to be covered, because the definition will say including any employee of the company who has got a regular assignment, he's got a contract of employment in the company, even his action is covered, which means your junior most accounts person who is supposed to file GST returns, he forgets and there is an action on him, then even he is covered. So the policy forms would decide what is the expense of coverage under the policy.
So you say it is not only directors.
So the policy has these two.
Yeah.
Correct. So I want to respond to the first big part of your question. These two extensions which talk about entity, the major coverage is, major extension is entity securities, as I mentioned, which protects the organization against any shares or treasury or debenture or any such claim against the entity. The other important coverage aspect is an extension or add-on cover is entity employment practices liability. So there is an EPLI, the popular jargon used in insurance industry is EPLI. That is entity employment practice liability. The employment practice liability action on a director is by default covered. He is by default covered for any allegations against him. But the entity to be covered only if the policy has this entity employment practices liability section, then the entity gets covered.
So, so you did mention about the last line, accounts officer not filing in time could get into difficulty, which also comes under the cover. You did mention when we started that governments are stronger these days in implementing. We would be interested to know if there is some action that happened in the country wherein the strong measures resulted in a financial loss for an organization which could have been protected under a D&O, which was or which could have been protected.
In my interactions with entrepreneurs, major rupee billionaire investors, this is a frequent grumble that the current government is acting too strong, which frequently comes in the way we are able to perform. But if there's a law and there's a requirement of compliance, everybody has to comply, irrespective of who is governing you. I found that these are resulting in actionable D&O claims. I'll share with you two cases. As I mentioned earlier, there is one case where the year 2012 annual returns, which are filed with the ROC, suddenly got action in 2016, maybe beginning of 2017. The company got a notice. The notice came from the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It had 20 different points of violation when they audited or when they inspected or reviewed the 2012 annual returns. It was addressed to each key management person by name. So the managing director, the joint managing director, the CFO, the company secretary, and the compliance officer. 5 individuals were named by name, and the address shown in that notice, which came from MCA, the address shown is their residential address, which is available with the MCA, and it also mentioned the DIN number. So you can see if government action is going to land on an individual, I found it is getting to be like that. These allegations range from serious errors in the eyes of law, that about 7 crores of provident fund deducted from the employee, gratuity deducted from the employees was not remitted to government. Non-remittance of gratuity amount deducted from the employees not remitted. Then about 3.5 lakhs of water tax bill not paid. All of them were inserted or mentioned by the auditors in the annual report, and from the auditors' remarks, the MCA had taken this. And various charges like this, the smallest charge was you are supposed to file ROC returns in paper which is printed on one side only. But in the returns you have filed, you printed on both sides, was also one of the remarks. What happened? The law permits this organization to compound the offense. So they engaged a consultant, took his advice, and then they compounded 10 out of these charges at a total value of 5 lakhs. For this company, which could be a 1,000 crore turnover company, paying 5 lakhs as a compounding fee officially over the table to the government didn't seem to be hurting too much. So they paid. They did inform their insurer. They did report this as a D&O claim. But within a year, they got another letter from MCA saying you compounded 10 of those offenses. What about the remaining 10? Again, they called this consultant and took his advice. He spoke to the MCA, the local office, ROC, and then came back saying that the compounding fee for these instances would be 50 lakhs. And then suddenly the customer realized this is too heavy on us, and then they realized they have a D&O cover. It was reported under D&O policy. Unfortunately, this company did not mention this incident in any of their renewal documents. In all the proposal forms after 2017, 18, 19, they never mentioned such a notice came from the government. And then the insurance company took a decision that we will not be honoring these claims because you never reported this in your renewal documentation. But the point is, government can get into action like this. Another instance, smaller one, but very interesting. Ready-made garment organization. They sell ready-made garments. They have stores. They have branded stores. They also sell online. So they displayed their products online like any other e-commerce company would do. Suddenly they got a notice from a state government weights and measures office. The office which was sending the notice is the Directorate of Weights and Measures. The reason, this company had advertised these products without mentioning MRP. On the website, when the product displayed, MRP was not displayed, which they said is a violation of Weights and Measures Act and the Weights and Measures rules. So they served a notice on this company. They had to file their reply, and then they had fortunately they had a D&O cover, and the fine that was to be paid for this violation, the settlement amount which was paid to the government, was indemnified by the insurance company. There could be 1,000 other ways in which government or a regulator or a authority can come down on a corporate, and how severe it can be. It can range from a few lakhs and maybe a few crores. Venkat.
So what I get as a flavor of what you say is, the first case that you said would have been payable. The only duty cast on the insured was, besides having a policy, is to report it properly. Once it's reported, it would have been covered. Is my understanding right?
Absolutely.
Right.
When if you permit me a minute to mention this, every time a policy is taken, the insured has to fill up a proposal form. In the proposal form, down the line, maybe in the second page or third page, there is going to be a question asking, is the insured or any of the directors or somebody in management aware of an incident which can lead to a claim under the policy, which can bring about a claim under the policy. If there is something already reported and known to them, they have to disclose it and give an opportunity for the insurer to price the risk or decide whether to accept their proposal or not. That opportunity should have been given. If that question is not answered, or somebody puts a yes or no, or somebody puts a dash or a hyphen, then that seems to be a non-disclosure. Like in a medical insurance policy, you don't disclose your disease and then later face a problem with the claim. In a D&O policy also, if this disclosure is not done, there may be a problem with the claim. Opportunity for the insurer to say, you should have disclosed this incident and given to price your appropriately and to decide whether to accept your policy or not. It's a very important point you raised, Venkat.
So I think now we get an idea that the moment there is an instance which has to be reported, whether it's going to translate into a claim or not in future, it's better to report it to the insurers and then it as it comes.
Yeah.
One big change that came about in recent years is the responsibility of non-executive directors is a lot more onerous than what it used to be earlier. Now, one fear that comes into the mind of someone getting into a directorship, an independent directorship somewhere, is that one, the existence of a director's liability insurance in itself. Two, would there be adequate limits available when it actually comes to hurt the independent director? How does the policy and the market address this issue? Plain and simple, what if there is no amount available to address my liability?
Yeah, so number one, this has to be seen in different dimensions. I've seen in many cases, if not all, an interest or a compulsion to take a D&O cover comes only when there is an investment from abroad. A private equity fund or an investor is bringing money, and their priority is, if they're going to nominate anybody onto the board of this investee company, then they will never, as I told earlier, they will never conclude the deal unless this company has got a proper D&O cover. They will insist on a policy copy, which I've seen in the case even for a startup company. It may be in the interest of the director, especially somebody coming in as a nominee director, to check with the management what kind of D&O cover is taken and what's the limit. But the $1 million question, Venkat, is to who decides what is the adequacy of cover, who decides? Normally, how I explain to customer is, there is no standard benchmark, there is no chart, or there is no published information as to what kind of limit is to be purchased by which organization. Normally, one would act based on one's own experience. If I had a legal challenge in the past, I have a 5 crore notice from the government or from a shareholder or from a bank alleging misdemeanor on my part or anybody in the company, then I know in my own experience a 5 crore legal challenge can come. So what you have gone through in the past can be the first level indicator. Number two, what has happened to corporates similar to you? maybe in your own industry, your peers, if you are into plastic manufacturing, what a plastic manufacturing company went through, or if you look at the parameter to be a turnover, what another 100 crore turnover company went through in terms of how heavy financial challenges they had, especially from the liability angle, and then whether they got a successful degree against them. That can be a benchmark. So the benchmark comes from our own example, our own experience. It comes from the experience of others. Thirdly, what has happened around? If you look at fines, I can take the example of what has been reported in public domain. If you look at fines, civil fines, the recent benchmark is National Greens Tribunal imposing a 50 crore fine on one of the chemical companies where a leakage was alleged. A leakage was seen, not just alleged, it was there. So the 50 crore suddenly becomes a benchmark for a chemical company if it's going to be fined. It needs another 1 hour debate whether a fine is insurable or not, whether it has to be a coverage under the policy itself. It's another subject of debate. But if it's going to be, if you're going to assess the exposure of corporates as to how heavy it can be, you can look at the biggest example in my view in India is Union Carbide. Much bigger example worldwide could be the Exxon Valdez oil leak in Alaska or the Gulf of Mexico blowout. There are grand examples of how liability can land on corporates. But look at the Indian example, looking at affordability of corporates to budget for how much they want to pay as premium. What has happened in India is relevant. What has happened in recent years or days or weeks is very relevant. I found in case of fines and penalties, this 50 crore fine is a benchmark that I would look at as fine. Whether the order is on the organization or on the managing director by name is to be seen. But I think that the limit of indemnity to be procured is something to be discussed by a corporate with their brokers. And brokers would be able to, from their experience, would be able to provide a benchmark. A broker can give how many software companies he has and what kind of limits without naming the customer. 10 companies or 20 companies who are in software business with so much turnover, how much limit they have bought. If you are in chemical industry, a broker can tell you how many chemical industries they have all over India who purchased D&O, what kind of limit they are buying. But the general tendency, Venkat, if you permit me, I want to mention here, there is a difference between the way law works or doesn't work in India. If you look at the $50 billion Madoff case in US, the Bernie Madoff, $50 billion swindling, when he ran a Ponzi scheme, he was caught and then his entire assets were taken over. The trial took place only about 2.5 years. In 2.5 years, Madoff is in jail and the authorities were selling off his assets and paying to the creditors. It took only 2.5 years. If you take the case of Rajat Gupta and Rajaratnam, which are reported cases in US for insider trading, it took only about 1.5 years, 2 years for the entire trial process. And after serving his sentence, Rajat Gupta has come out after completing his sentence. That's how fast or how effective legal process is. The comfort for corporates and also insurers in a way is the legal process in India is quite long. The trial will take years and there is an appeal to the High Court and then appeal to the Supreme Court, and if it's single bench to a larger bench, the gestation time or a life cycle of a civil suit could be 30 years. So it gives corporate that I don't have threat. So why should I worry about legal exposure? Insurers are soft in what they are offering as pricing or as add-on covers or as capacity on this comfort that if it's an Indian company operating in India is likely to face a legal challenge in India, even if somebody files a case on him, it's going to take 15, 20, 30 years for a successful award to come out. Who will be alive, who will be dead by that time, nobody knows.
So, I still haven't been able to elaborate on the non-executive directors part. How protected, because the executive directors run the day-to-day organization, anything goes wrong, I'm sure they will stake a first claim to the policy limits available. Whereas I or someone as a non-executive director sometimes could be exposed for want of limits available.
You touched upon a very important point of discussion on D&O. If you say D&O cover, we are talking of a policy form and what's inbuilt into the policy form. There could be 1,000 different policy forms worldwide as to how narrow or wide the coverage could be. Many of the benefits are already inbuilt in some of the policy forms. In other policy forms, you have to buy those covers, add-on covers. What today characterizes a good D&O cover in India as negotiated by good brokers would be choosing a right policy form when maximum coverage is already built into the policy form itself. When I say policy form, I'm talking about the policy contract in terms of wordings, which decides the coverage, which runs into possibly 20-30 pages. That's the policy form I'm talking about. Many extensions or covers are already inbuilt, but a good policy, good D&O policy, when it ends up being placed, will be characterized by a good policy form in a way, in a big way. But that's not all. There are so many add-on covers that should be included in the D&O cover, depending on what's the active business of the customer and what kind of exposure they have. You have companies which are Indian companies serving Indian markets. Then you have Indian companies serving Southeast Asian market. They don't have a single US or European customer. Then there are Indian companies who have a big time exposure, like software companies, 90% exposure to US customers. So depending on what your business is, your policy has to be adequate in terms of value. It has to be adequate in terms of add-on covers. Coming to this question of non-executive directors, as you rightly said, the policy limit may be used up, may be exhausted by the entity and the directors, executive directors. So there is an add-on cover for specifically acquiring additional limits for non-executive directors. So when the sum insured is exhausted under the policy for the entity and the directors, there is something more left, which is to be used up for the exposure for non-executive directors. So number one requirement is for a broker to remember that he should acquire this add-on cover. Number two is what is the sublimit that an insurer is happy to give. Sometimes they give very low limits. So we have seen policies where the limits are just about 1 lakh or 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. Depending on the policy limit, overall aggregate limit that is purchased, then the non-executive director's additional cover is a little more. I have not seen policy where it's 100%, but definitely 10%, 20% of the policy limit is easily available as protection for non-executive directors. This limit is in addition to the policy limit of indemnity. There are other add-on covers like this in the policy. There are so many add-on covers that are very useful.
Okay. So this additional limit that you
I'll mention one or. Yeah, tell me, okay.
This additional limit that you mentioned for non-executive directors is not available for the entity or the directors. It's reserved for them.
Yeah, that's exclusive for the non-executive directors. Okay. So that's a big protection for them.
Okay. Okay. You're going to tell about a couple of more extensions.
Yeah, very interesting add-on covers. It's a long list. It's a long, it's a very wrong word to use, laundry list. But there is a good wish list, I would say, because whatever we wish, the insurers wouldn't end up giving. So it's a wish list for us, for me as a broker. But we try to, for the premium that we agree, for the percentage of rate that we pay, we end up getting these very useful covers. One interesting cover that I would consider is for coverage for the spouse, legal heir, live-in partner, the agent, official liquidator, any such person other than the insured is also covered for the full limit. Why this is useful is, especially in the Indian context, when the legal process is long, there may be a point of time when this particular insured director will die. But civil law will pursue this interest of the claimant. Even if somebody is dead, his estate can be liquidated to enforce the award. So if he is dead in the year 2010, and then the case continues, the plaintiff includes the estate of this individual, his legal heirs are impleted, and is able to get a successful award, the court can execute this award and then attach the property belonging to the dead person, because that is his estate. It can't be alienated. So the coverage for spouses, agent, live-in partner, at least one policy I know provides this coverage even for a live-in partner, though it may be forward-looking for the Indian cultural environment. Since these are American or European wordings, it names that this will protect live-in partners also. So this is very, very important for the D&O cover to include this add-on cover. Like this, there are a number of useful add-on covers that are there in the policy. So again, I want to reiterate a good D&O cover for the premium agreed and for the character or the profile of the company is going to be good only based on choice of a good policy form and the right add-on covers that have been procured.
Okay, so I think time is flying, so I will still have one question. We've had a lot of questions from audience.
Yeah.
We'll try to take it if we have time after that. How do you see the availability of market and capacities for this product? Do you have enough insurers offering this product? Has there been a change in their appetite post-COVID? How does it appear now?
It works, for those who are not familiar with the insurance market from the outside, big numbers seem to be a little difficult and impossible, but the insurance sector, insurance industry has its own mechanism. For a start, the Indian market, those insurers who are active in this liability insurance market, so there I have to qualify that if there are 35 insurers, not all of them are active liability insurers. There could be 37 or 38, there will be more insurers coming in. As a matter of risk management for the insurance companies, they don't start writing liability insurance from day one. They need to have an experience in the market. Slowly, they will launch one by one the liability policies. So as of 2020, the liability insurance market is driven by maybe about a dozen insurance companies. Maybe there are one or two more just outside that dozen, but predominantly these 10, 12 companies drive the liability insurance market. They would have capacities, if I want to believe, they would have capacities of about $30 million US, which they can write, which means about 220 crores. They themselves can issue. Suppose a large corporate wants a cover for 500 crores, correct? 500 crores. Then based on co-insurance, more than one insurer can get involved. So they will write up to their capacity. Suppose you want a 1,000 crore cover, they may take reinsurance, but you have GIC of India, which is a reinsurer available in India, they'll be able to add capacity. And then if it's going to be bigger, there can be reinsurers from other countries who may, like Lloyd's or Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai markets, who will be willing to come and take a share of this very big policy. But I have not seen 500 crores or 1,000 crores kind of policies. Not because first reason is I don't think Indian corporates would think they have such a big risk. They may have a risk. We do not know. Another union corporate incident happening to an Indian corporate will need a 1,000 crore liability insurance policy. I'm sure. But at this stage, the perspective or the perception of insurers, customers would be not to buy very high limits. So I would think the first area of review for an typical Indian corporate would be to look at whether they require D&O cover at all. In my view, I would say they do. Second is how much limits they want to buy. They didn't review this.
Okay. So thanks, Mr. Arun, for this wonderful session. We've had a few questions which have come in, but there is always a paucity of time. I've tried to address some of the questions the way when I asked you as they were flowing in. I'm sure D&O is not a 1 hour session kind of a product. You will require more hours, as you nicely pointed out. Fines and penalties alone could take an hour of discussion and still remain unresolved. We would surely come up with more such sessions for the benefit of all our participants. Before we wind up, I extend our thanks to you for such a describing it so eloquently. I thank all the participants for having joined us this evening. For those who've been writing in with questions, with messages, we thank you for your participation. Please bear with us if we have not been able to answer all your questions. For want of time, we'll try to address that offline by reaching out to you and addressing the areas which you've raised with us. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Arun.
Thanks, Venkatesh. Thanks to Bharati for giving the opportunity to address this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.